there's been a noticeable period of silence from Trump about Iran for the last 48 hours, which is a long time in Trump world, because I don't think that they really know exactly how it's going to be turning out and what they're going to find when the Iranians and the Omanis do their deal. I think they're going to be playing catch up. But what you will hear from President Trump is that he was fully in control of the situation, of course, and if it's a deal that looks acceptable, he will suggest that he was involved in making the deal.
So a possible Iran-Oman deal over the Strait of Hormuz raises questions about whether diplomacy can succeed while US pressure on Tehran continues. The role of Washington, domestic political pressures, tensions within the administration could, of course, shape President Trump's next steps. Earlier, I spoke to Alan Eyre, who said that a diplomatic solution would require a lot of hard work from the Americans.
I think the Trump administration is either unwilling or unable to negotiate in a serious and sustained manner with Iran. And certainly Iran has lost all trust and confidence in this U.S. administration. So if President Trump and his administration are willing to accept the same deal that was on the table when we attacked Iran on February 28th, then there could be a nuclear deal. But I think even that's going to be a lot of hard work that this administration really doesn't want to do.
Well, that's Alan Eyre from the Middle East Institute. Joining me now is the Times' US editor, David Charter. We'll be talking in a minute as well to Ali Vaez, Deputy Programme Director for Middle East and North Africa at the International Crisis Group. To you, David, first, how does Washington view the emerging Iran-Oman agreement?
Well, Trump is trying to suggest that it's all part of the process that of negotiation that America is involved in. But it pretty clearly seems to have cut out the Americans from where we're sitting. And there's been a noticeable period of silence from Trump about Iran for the last 48 hours, which is a long time in Trump world, because I don't think that they really know exactly how it's going to be turning out and what they're going to find when the Iranians and the Omanis do their deal. I think they're going to be playing catch up. But what you will hear from President Trump is that he was fully in control of the situation, of course, and if it's a deal that looks acceptable, he will suggest that he was involved in making the deal.
Is there any truth in reports of tensions between President Trump and his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, or indeed this growing belief that he would like to keep everything much calmer now as we approach the upcoming midterm elections in the United States, and possibly the violence could then erupt again after that?
Oh, well, the midterms is quite a long way off. It's not until early November. So there's a long way to go until then. But it's pretty clear that there's been some tensions even among the top team. We've had quite a lot of suggestions from sources and reporting that there's no clear decision about which strategy to adopt with making a final deal. And Trump seems to change his mind from one day to the next. But what is making him angry, we're told, is that he may not have all the means at his disposal in terms of weaponry to hit Iran hard should he want to, which has been his approach in the last few months. Has been to regularly show a display of American firepower to try and hold the Iranians' feet to the fire and get them back to a kind of negotiation that will deliver a result for him.
So is he blaming his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for the lack of missiles?
He's actually blaming the Ukrainians and Joe Biden, which is, bear with me, but what is his most common complaint is that President Biden gave away so much munitions, material, military material to Ukraine, this suggests that there's a shortfall. But of course, he won't admit that there is any kind of shortfall. He does keep saying that there is plenty of ammunition in the store cupboard. But we do know that the American military has been scouring bases around the world to get the types of missiles, both defensive and offensive, that are needed to give him all the options he wants. We know that various military commanders have drawn up plans for fresh attacks, up to and including ground forces, but Trump is not going there at the moment, and the main reason seems to be that they don't really want to commit all the military material and leave them rather depleted in their weaponry.
David Charter, thanks very much for the Times' US editor there. And listening, as I said, Ali Vaez, Deputy Programme Director for Middle East and North Africa at the International Crisis Group. Ali Vaez, what is the status then of the US blockade in the Strait? Is it still operating?
Yes, the U.S. blockade is fully in place, and it is putting pressure on the Iranian economy. But during the very short reprieve when the Memorandum of Understanding of last June was being implemented, in about 10 days, Iran managed to send about 80 million barrels of oil east of Malacca, and therefore it did buy itself sufficient cushion for about 3 months, both in terms of hard currency revenue and also imports of basic staples and critical goods that it needed. So the blockade might eventually work, but the clock is ticking much faster on the economic pressure that the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran is creating for the United States and the global economy.
So this potential deal between Iran and Oman, where they basically police various parts of the strait, could that help reduce wider regional tensions, do you think?
Well, I think we should think about this as a three-phase process. Phase one is this Hormuz deal, which is a formula for administrating traffic for a 2 to 4 month window, and then after that, in the long term. But at this stage, the strait is not going to be open. For that, we need to enter into phase two, which is return to the Memorandum of Understanding by Iran and the United States, and that would require a degree of conversation and discussions about the mechanisms to return to the deal. The U.S. would have to comply with its obligations as outlined under Article 13 of the MOU, which would include lifting its own blockade, enforcing a ceasefire in Lebanon, giving Iran access to its frozen assets, and issuing a waiver for Iranian oil and petrochemical exports. So all of that would have to happen for Iran to open the strait. And then phase three is negotiations about a final agreement in a 60-day extendable time frame. I do believe that it's, even in the best case scenario, as Alan Eyre told you earlier, I don't think we would ever get into phase three. But if we get into phase 1 and 2 already, that would be significant progress.
And as you know, with Alan Eyre earlier, I was discussing the fact that the idea of curtailing Iran's nuclear ambitions was the meat of the Memorandum of Understanding signed in June. Is that still a key ambition, and could that still thwart any potential negotiated deal?
Well, it is a key ambition because the reality is that President Trump has not resolved the main issue for which he has now launched 2 wars against Iran in the course of about a year. And as long as that issue is not resolved, Israel would also remain on the edge, and the equilibrium would be very unstable. But again, now there is a lot of distrust, and these issues are very complicated. It would take a lot of time a lot of focus, patience, discipline, which are things that this administration, the Trump administration, has not demonstrated that it's good at, not just in the case of Iran, but also in other complex negotiations like Ukraine or Gaza. So it's hard to be optimistic that a final nuclear agreement would be reached. And that creates a situation in which the memorandum of understanding, even if it's fully implemented, would still be pretty unstable. And especially after the US midterm elections, there is a risk that the parties might relapse into conflict.
And I suppose Gulf countries then are holding their breath now. If we are looking at some sort of deal in the first place that gives Iran control over the northern route of the Strait of Hormuz, and Oman deals with the southern side, managing traffic going out of the southern side. Is that workable? And how are Gulf countries likely to respond to such a deal, do you think?
So look, if it were up to Iran and Oman to negotiate a bilateral agreement about the management of the strait, this would have happened a few weeks ago. The reason that it took a long time, and it's not even finalized as we speak, is because Oman had to consult with other Gulf countries and with the United States to make sure that everybody would be on board with whatever formula they can negotiate with Iran. And at this point, I think the choice for everyone, all the key stakeholders, is that although this deal that leaves Iran in control of the traffic going into the strait, and of course, once you control what's going in, you're also controlling what's coming out. It is very uncomfortable, but it is better compared to the alternative, which is the strait remaining closed and Iran and the US getting into cycles of violence that would disrupt the economies of all of these countries around the region and make them subject to Iranian retaliatory action. So at this point, I think everybody has come to terms with the fact that as uncomfortable as this is, it's better than the alternative.
Better than the alternative. Ali Vaez, thank you very much. Iran specialist at the International Crisis Group. And listening to that is Lars Jensen, shipping analyst, CEO of Vespucci Maritime. Lars, we have spoken to you a fair amount over the last couple of months because I'm particularly keen to know what is happening to all the vessels, the seafarers who've effectively been held hostage in the Strait for these past few months, and whether this deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz might be close between Iran and Oman. Do you feel hopeful of movement this time, or is it another false dawn?
I wouldn't feel all too hopeful. There are a couple of elements there. When we did have the reprieve about a month ago with the ceasefire at the time, there was actually a substantial amount of vessels that did leave the Persian Gulf. Not as many came back in. So the number of vessels you can say trapped in there is a lot less than what it used to be. But if I look at this from the perspective of the shipping community, we are at a point where, to be quite blunt, no one trusts words, neither from Iran nor from the US. No one would place much faith in any agreement, was it to be announced or signed. And this is simply based on what we have seen the last couple of months. Every time there's been an agreement signed, it had lasted a few days, then ships being shot and everything closes down again. So realistically, if, and that's a major if, we see another deal being announced that the strait is open, the ships that will start to go through, especially going back into the Persian Gulf, are shipping companies that are willing to take a relatively high amount of risk. It will be a tactical decision for one sailing only. Nobody would place any credence in a new agreement that this would have any staying power until we have seen it ongoing for months. The other element I think is important to put out there, there's a lot of talk today and yesterday about a potential deal between Iran and Oman of making a deal for managing the Hormuz. What I think is not getting enough airtime is how. Because part of the deal that we heard of is it involves payment. Any kind of payment here that goes to Iran would be in direct violation of both EU and US sanctions. So any global shipping company that wants to do any business within the EU or the US or is located there would not be able to actually live up to that deal.
And I mean, apart from that as well, you know, the prospect of maybe having to pay fees, you've got Iran potentially policing traffic coming in on the northern route, and Oman managing traffic going out of the southern side. I mean, that already looks immensely complicated, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, honestly, nobody's really worried about what Oman would or would not do here. It's Iran that's the key. And that's also why I think the key here, and that is, you can say, very fluffy, but the key to something sustainable is we need to see a deal that satisfies Iran. And that might not be a deal anybody apart from Iran actually likes. But if Iran does not like the deal, they have set the precedent multiple times in the past few months. If they don't like the deal or feel the deal is being violated, they will shoot at ships and shut down Hormuz again. No matter the amount of deals being signed or papers being signed, Iran still retains this ability.
Okay. And Lars, just very quickly, are there any vessels trapped there that have been there since the very beginning that didn't manage to get out during the break? And what's the condition of the mariners who've been trapped on board?
There are still vessels there that have been there since the beginning. But one thing that's important to note, normally there are hundreds of vessels that only ply their trade within the Persian Gulf. Some of these numbers we have seen of thousands of vessels being trapped is not actually correct, because a lot of these vessels ply their trade inside the Persian Gulf. Some of the trades, some of the vessels, if you look at, for example, container vessels, we see vessels that used to go from, for example, India to Persian Gulf, then they got trapped in the Persian Gulf, but they're not sitting idle. What they do now is move cargo within the Persian Gulf between the different Persian Gulf states. Yeah. So in my book, it would be wrong to actually call them trapped. They're now operating on another trade.
Okay.
Are seafarers trapped? No, I think that's a wrong perspective as well. For seafarers on vessels in there, even if the vessel cannot go out, there's nothing preventing that vessel from going to port and do crew change, for example.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, Lars. It's really useful to get an update from you as well. Shipping analyst Lars Jensen.